What is good, y'all? It's Brian back with the Blurting While Dad live stream back on Tuesday night. Um, and so I wanted to jump in here real quick. First of all, we'll do a quick plug and shout out to the new community. I'm still growing it, the League of Extraordinary Unks and Aunties. If you're interested or you got any questions, drop them in the chat and I can kind of lay them out and lay out what the vision is with the community. I wanted to have a community, especially after this week with all the gender wars bullshit that was going on. I wanted to have a community for Black nerds that was devoid of a lot of your standard gender war or standard internet fare when it comes to Black nerd groups, because it always ends up breaking down onto weird gender wars. This week it was the Meg and Clay show that hijacked a lot of discourse in nerd groups and stuff like that. And I get it; it's pop culture. It's meant to start us conversing, but it's supremely unimportant. Like, it's really really unimportant to the matters of the day. But some people are obsessed with it. But what I saw was specifically with the Megan Clay stuff. Meg the Stallion and Clay Thompson stuff. Specifically, what I saw was either any group that had their specific ideological axe to grind use that as a proxy to bang on whatever, if they're mad at men, if they're mad at women. I saw a lot of the weird little Tory dudes, the Tory Lanez dudes get in there, and that's their call celebrate. They're gonna fight you to the ground on Tory and whatnot. It just turned into this weird mess, and it's supposed to be about nerd stuff, and we're arguing about this stuff. So anyway, this group is kind of a haven for that. It's a haven from that. And so I'm trying to grow a group where we don't have to have these kind of stupid conversations, or if we are going to have the conversations, they happen at a higher level than the way that they currently exist. So but yeah, if you're interested or you have any questions about what my vision is with the league and the kind of space for Black nerds, let me know, and I can let you know what's going on with that. This week I wanted to talk, get into my nerd bag a little bit, talk about some observations from Saturday morning, i.e. the lack of Saturday morning cartoons, and give you a little bit of history about why Saturday morning cartoons and even cartoons after school ain't a thing anymore. Give you a little bit of history, and just talk about how the government essentially ruined that. They ruined, as is everything they pretty much touched, but they definitely ruined Saturday morning cartoons. And the only reason I'm having this conversation, the reason why I'm having it is it was something I noticed waking up on Saturday morning, and it's like, damn, there ain't nothing for kids to watch, bro. And on regular TV now, on cable, yeah, on streaming platforms, yeah, but on regular TV, the experience on Saturday mornings for people my age, you woke up around, if you got up early, Saturday morning started around 5 if you were really motivated to watch your shows. From like 5 until like noon, it was our time. There were our shows, and it was media geared specifically for kids. And it was you could kind of veg out, get your bowl of cereal. You didn't have to bother your parents. You just turned on cartoons from the time you woke up until noon, when it was time for you to get kicked out of the house and go play in the neighborhood. That's what Saturday morning was. And after school, before school, you could watch cartoons before school on regular channels and then watch it after school. It was a great time. It was really kind of a kid oriented time. And I know that we say, everything, we make everything for kids now, but back then they made it so that kids would actually have their own rituals around Saturday mornings and things along those lines. And we got rid of that. So I wanted to talk about the story behind Saturday morning cartoons and why they don't exist anymore. If you guys will humor me a little bit. Okay. So Saturday morning cartoons, and by extension, after school cartoons in the morning on regular television. I'm not talking about Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon or anything. I'm talking about CBS, Fox, ABC. Saturday morning cartoons didn't disappear because kids stopped watching them. It had nothing to do with ratings or anything. They disappeared because the system around them changed. Specifically, we had government regulations change things. And I mean, I can't necessarily fault anybody for it because it was kind of insidious how they made it so that kids couldn't really tell the line between when the cartoon ended and when the commercial began. And so there was a lot of discussion about that. There's a very specific reason. If you go watch like the old Spider-Man from the 90s, I'm not talking about Spider-Man as Amazing Friends or anything. I'm talking about Spider-Man from the 90s. There's a very specific reason why Spider-Man could only like punch robots, or if they punch, they cut away, or if they kick, they cut away. Or he can only throw people because that was regulations that fell into the government regulations. You couldn't, it was considered an act of violence. There's a reason why a lot of those cartoons, we thought they were really violent, but they weren't really that violent. Like G.I. Joe and Cobra never hit anybody and they never hit anything until the movie. When the movies rolled around, that's when people started getting clipped. What's going on? How you doing? Thanks for tuning in. God bless you too. The movies rolled around when they actually could go onto the big screen, and that's where we saw the Transformer slaughter of 1986, I believe, in theaters with my own eyes. I watched Optimus Prime's dead body on my screen. But there was a lot of the stuff that government regulation dictated a lot of what could happen with Saturday morning cartoons. And it created the pathway for it, but then also removed it. Okay. So regulation changed, the rules around advertising changed, cable came in, streaming came in. The real loss wasn't necessarily the animation, even though there were some classic things that kind of got missed in there. Like on Cartoon Express, it used to be, I think came on, I want to say CBS. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but Thunder the Barbarian. If you ever have an opportunity, you like retro cartoons, go check out Thunder the Barbarian, especially if you're a comic book nerd, because a lot of comic book artists did the storyboarding for Thunder the Barbarian and even some of the character design. And so you really get a sense of that 80s, 70s, 80s sci-fi comic book. Hey, how's it going? What's up? What's up? Thanks for tuning in. If you want to get a sense of, if you want to see like 80s and 90s comic books, or not 80s, 70s and 80s comic book styles on the screen, watch Thunder the Barbarian, because they had a lot of artists from the major companies storyboarding for Thunder the Barbarian. And I think they even did some shows. Can you say hi to me? Hi, Sarah. How you doing? Thanks for tuning in, Sarah. We're talking about nerd stuff here. So kind of in my bag about Saturday morning cartoons and talking about some of the history about why they don't exist anymore. But yeah, if you ever want to see and get a sense of the art of how comic books used to be versus and looking at them animated, Thunder the Barbarian. Thunder the Barbarian was kind of a different beast in and of itself, because it had storylines that crossed from one episode to the other, and so sometimes storylines weren't resolved in a nice tidy little box. Sometimes characters got killed. And they really had a level of respect for the audience where they didn't feel like they needed to dumb it down or anything. It was really kind of an odd cartoon. Like you sit there and watch Muppet Babies and all this other stuff, and then reruns of Thunder the Barbarian will just come on and turn everything on its ear. It was really dope. But regulation changed, cable came in, we got streaming and stuff, and the loss was not animation. Kids have more animation now than they ever did. The real loss was a time that was specifically carved out for kids on the major networks for their programming. And you got to discover things. You got to discover new shows. Really, it was the cartoons were a vehicle to sell toys, and let's not mince any words on that. And so, but it was appointment television. Like you didn't have any DVR or anything. If you missed, if you missed that week's show, you had to wait till summer rolled around to see the reruns. Um, but I think it was really a special time, and it was really kind of dope being a kid because it was something that was specifically carved out for us. Now, it was to sell us stuff. It was to get our parents to buy stuff, but it was kind of dope. And so before streaming and YouTube and tablets and everything, um, you could sit and you watched what was on. If your show came on at 8:30 and you missed it, that was it. And so the limitation created that urgency. And I'm not just talking about Saturday mornings, I'm talking about after school shows too. Um, After school shows, I'm talking about and this is He-Man, this is She-Ra to a degree. Um, what else do we have? Jim, uh yeah, G.I. Joe. All of these shows, when they produce these, they're like producing 60 or 70 episodes because they're meant to show every single day after school. And um, you could have multi-part arcs. Like G.I. Joe had a couple of multi-part kind of arcs. Transformers did too. Um, and they would show either before school in the morning or after school, right, as you're getting in. But they made sure that they made it so that as you were coming in or as right before you left for school, you had your cartoons, and then they went to adult programming. Okay. Um, but it was not just content availability, it was a weekly event. Like you would plan your Saturday mornings. I get my bowl of cereal, you know, shuffle downstairs, grab my bowl of cereal. I was into Apple Jacks, OJ's. If you're really old school, I had OJ's, but Apple Jacks. Get my bowl of Apple Jacks, sit down. It's cartoon time, and it was kind of a dope thing because it felt special. Again, I know the cynicism comes in. It was marketed. It was basically unlimited, unfiltered marketing directly towards kids for toys and stuff. And that's where they stuffed all the commercials for cereal and toys and all of that other stuff. It got shoved into Saturday morning or before and after school blocks. Okay. But there's ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox Kids, Kids WB, Disney's One Saturday Morning. They all kind of defined different eras, like depending on how old you are. Some of these sound familiar, others don't sound familiar. Some people that were into the Fox Kid that came in the Fox Kids era, they weren't there for when ABC, NBC, and CBS had Saturday morning cartoons. They may have come in on the tail end of that. Others might have aged out before we shifted over to Fox Kids and WB and stuff. It just was different eras. Okay. And different generations had different anchor shows. From Looney Tunes, Fat Albert, Super Friends, Scooby-Doo, the Smurfs, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And if you're in the 90s, it's X-Men, the animated series, Batman, the animated series, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Animaniacs. If you're a little bit younger, we got Recess, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! I still mess with Yu-Gi-Oh! Even though I was in high school and college. Jackie Chan Adventures was one of my high school fixes. And so the lineups changed, but the pattern stayed the same. Kids all over the country locked in, and it was kind of this shared experience. And you could go talk to your friends about what was on the show that morning. Here's the thing. I was a huge Mr. T fan when I was little. And I don't think y'all understand. Crack era, 80s, black kid, there weren't a lot of role models out there. And so we had Optimus Prime, we had Mr. T. And I was a huge Mr. T fan back in the days. And so Mr. T had A-Team, but he also had this really hyper bizarre cartoon where I don't know if he was the coach or if he was just the manager. He traveled around with a busload of kids that were gymnasts, and they would solve mysteries. If you've ever watched like Mike Tyson Mysteries, it's kind of based on some of the odd situations that happened in the Mr. T show. But it was kind of this unique thing that just happened on Saturday morning. We had Turbo Teen, where a dude, like a teenager, changed into a car. Like we got a lot of super experimental stuff in cartoons. Some of it was really insipid and crazy, but some of it was kind of dope. But yeah, kids across the country watched a lot of the same things at the same time. And we had schoolyard conversations about it. Like I remember going in watching Transformers in the morning and going in, I think it was the Return of Optimus Prime, going to the playground and meeting up with the crew and talking about it. And, we would have our imaginary fights, who would win, He-Man or Optimus Prime. Like, we would have these things, but we'd have our own conversations around this kind of stuff. And I mean, it was like our version of stories. Like, if you had older folks that watch soap operas and everything, it was our version of watching our stories. It's Saturday morning cartoons and weekday morning cartoons. You didn't have to explain what happened on Saturday morning. Everybody knew. The conversation just started at recess. And everybody had their specific cartoons they liked or disliked. I didn't mess with Punky Brewster. I had friends that was all into Punky Brewster. I had friends that didn't really mess with He-Man like that, but they was on Visionaries. So there were so many different options that you could really just kind of pick your poison and watch what you wanted to watch. The major part of the 80s animation boom was toy sales. And so shows like He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers, My Little Pony, Care Bear, Strawberry Shortcake, Gems, they weren't just shows. They were toy ecosystems. They were toy delivery systems. And that's part of the reason why we don't have Saturday morning cartoons now. Because unfortunately, these toy companies took advantage of the fact that the line between commercial and television was blurred. And so oftentimes you would see new Transformers debut just because they were releasing a new toy. The entire premise behind the Transformer movie and them butchering the Autobots, like butchering them, brutalizing and butchering them in the movie, was because they wanted to roll out a new line of Transformers toys. And they wanted kids to just say, yeah, we don't like Optimus Prime and Bumblebee no more and Jazz. I think Bumblebee and Jazz survived, but we don't like Optimus Prime and Ironhide no more. And so we're just going to murder them in front of these children's eyes on the big screen. They're going to get blasted. Prowl's going to have smoke coming out of his eyes and mouth. He's going to have a big hole blasted through them. The kids will love it. Kids will love it. And then we're going to introduce other robots like Springer and RC, and we're going to replace Optimus Prime with Rodimus Prime, who transforms into a giant station wagon. Kids will love that. They'll love their awesome Optimus Prime that they've been vested in emotionally for the last couple of years. They're going to love the fact that we replace the semi truck that Optimus Prime transformed into with a whiny station wagon, a whiny, ineffective leader of the Autobots who transforms into a station wagon. Kids will love it. And so that's why they killed all the Transformers. They tried to do that with the G.I. Joe movie. Initially, they were going to kill Duke in the G.I. Joe movie. He was supposed to die in the G.I. Joe movie so that they could roll out Falcon as the new, or is it Falcon? Whoever his little brother was or whatnot. They're going to roll out new toys and replace Duke and Cobra Commander and all of them. They were going to replace them with new characters and new toy lines. And they pulled back because of the backlash from the Transformer movie was so abrupt and so loud. Like, kids were devastated in the theaters. I was one of them. I know. It was like, I don't know if you've ever seen Hamburger Hill. It was like Hamburger Hill, except it was for kids. Saving Private Ryan for kids. That's kind of what the Transformers movie was. And that's what they tried to make the G.I. Joe movie into. But they had to alter course because the backlash was so bad. And so these were toy delivery systems. The toy aisle was the conversion point. A lot of our childhood memories were sincere, but there's a business model underneath of them that was really calculated. Whenever they rolled out a new character on He-Man or a new vehicle on He-Man, that was in the store that week. Okay. We were watching people actually put together stories and stuff and compelling narratives and things. But at the end of the day, it was to sell us toys. Okay. That's really what it was. And it was super jaded, but I think when we look back on it, a lot of times you do the hindsight kind of thing, and it looks a little bit more jaded than it actually was. For us, it was pure. You sit there and you watch the cartoons, and you may want the action figures or whatnot, but the cartoons were the destination television. Okay. What changed things was the Children's Television Act of 1990. It changed the environment around children's television. It regulated a bunch of things. There was a specific amount of educational content that had to be put in there, and so that's where you started getting these weird lessons. Captain Planet was totally built around that. And in hindsight, being 2020, Captain Planet was really gully. Like Captain Planet had some real shit going on. People was getting shot up, um, uh, dying of AIDS and all kinds of other stuff, like doing drugs and doing hard drugs and everything. Like Captain Planet was crazy. But when in my mind, when I was younger, I'm like, this is soft, bro. I don't want to watch this stuff. Um, but yeah, it restricted advertising during children's programming and pushed broadcasters towards educational and informational content, shit that you don't want to watch, things that we didn't want to watch. We had Sesame Street, we watched Sesame Street, and then once we got done with Sesame Street, we turned into cartoons, and that was it. It didn't instantly kill Saturday morning cartoons. It didn't flip the switch, but it changed the economics and removed the incentive for toy companies to get behind creating cartoons. It really did. Educational programming became easier to justify than action cartoons around toys, monsters, and robots and stuff. And it really changed the game, and not in a great way, because it literally put a bunch of stuff in front of our face that we didn't necessarily want to see. I don't want to watch. Like this morning, you turn on Saturday morning cartoons. What do you see? 5 animal shows, 5 different shows about animals. Nobody's watching that seriously. Like, you might watch a couple of minutes of it, but no kids are sitting there waking up excited to sit there and watch Jack Hanna's animal adventure thing. Anybody watching that stuff? But that's what the act in 1990 did. It changed the game. The Children's Television Act of 1990, and it shifted everything. It shifted the way that we consumed cartoons and the way they were produced. Okay. And so they didn't walk in the room and shoot Saturday morning cartoons in the face, just change the economics. And once the economics changed, the programming started changing. Okay. And then cable kind of came in. So when I was growing up, cable was kind of an optional thing, and it was really a rich kid thing. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. And so it was a big deal for us to have cable for a couple of months out of the year and then not have cable for the rest of the year. And when cable showed up, it kind of changed the game for animation. Broadcast Saturday mornings mattered more when kids had fewer options, but cable changed that. So you had Nickelodeon, you had Cartoon Network, you had Disney Channel, Toon Disney, Boomerang. And that's where the kids' cartoons is. I maintain the Boomerang isn't necessarily for kids. Boomerang was for me, for adults. But it was outside of that Saturday morning window, and you could watch cartoons basically all around the clock. And when you can watch them around the clock, it removes the mystique a little bit. Cartoon Network made animation available all week. And Cartoon Network had a legendary run with Toonami. Like Toonami changed after school game, because when I was growing up, you had what we used to call what's now anime used to be called Japanimation, or that show with the weird dialogue like Voltron or Robotech. When I was growing up, we didn't quite know that Robotech was a Macross or whatever. Speed Racer was something else completely. We didn't necessarily know, and so when we see it and see more detailed animation, we just kind of locked in. But Toonami was a game changer, and it really took anime and put it front and center in front of the mainstream. Back in the days, man, anime was like nerd, like it was hardline nerds. Like we used to have to go to Blockbuster. I'm dating myself. We used to have to go to Blockbuster Video and see what was out. Akira, was it Demon City, Mad City, something along those lines. Ninja Scroll. We would rent those and watch those. But you didn't see them on TV. Now, every once in a while, the Sci-Fi Channel would have like their anime marathon that will come on a couple times a year, and you would lock in and catch stuff that you couldn't rent. But Toonami really was a game changer. It was. It altered the landscape of animation in the United States, and really made it so that a lot of domestic animation had to compete with Japanese animation that had more serious storylines, better quality art. The dialogue, the dubbing wasn't great, but You just kind of adjusted to it. But yeah, Toonami changed after school because Toonami was dope enough that I was coming home and watching Toonami and like as a senior in high school and in college and stuff. I was watching Toonami when I got home from my classes. Cartoons didn't disappear from kids' lives; they migrated, and so they didn't stop watching cartoons, but cartoons escaped Saturday morning. And I'll stand on this. It made it feel. It made it feel a little less important. It didn't feel like a destination anymore. And the end came at it came slowly, then all of a sudden it was just gone. And so by the 90s, broadcast networks were pulling away from traditional Saturday morning cartoon blocks. They were expensive and they couldn't really justify the ad time. Hey Jacob, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in. Um, so you know that entire children's programming act, children's television act. It killed Saturday morning cartoons, but it came really slowly. By the 90s to 2000s, broadcast networks pulled away from it. ABC moved away from cartoons in 1992. They had a live action teen programming block in 1992. I think that's where you got Saved by the Bell and a couple of other things. ABC and CBS and eventually CW, they leaned more into educational or lifestyle programming blocks, which started driving kids away. CW's Vortex block, which by then I had aged out. Like, I had my own kids at that point. And they were babies at the time. But the CW's Vortex block ran from 2012 to 2014 and is treated as the last major Saturday morning cartoon block on broadcast television. And it ended in 2014. And it was replaced by One Magnificent Morning that nobody wanted to watch. The date matters because it was a symbolic end of the old broadcast television tradition of Saturday morning cartoons. And so the date was September 27th, 2014. Okay. That's when it kind of ended this, cartoons on Saturday mornings on regular television for kids. It wasn't in animation, but it ended Saturday morning cartoons as a ritual that kids across the country participated in. And you didn't have to have money to participate in it. You didn't have to have cable to participate in it. You could watch it with your friends, and it didn't matter where you were socioeconomically. Okay. And then, of course, streaming comes in. Streaming gives you access at your fingertips. You can watch whatever cartoon you want whenever you want to watch it. It was upgrading access, but it changed the relationship. Okay. Saturday morning cartoons, if you didn't catch it that first run, you was done. So you had to wait until rerun season came around. Streaming really took that away. And it's not a bad thing. It's progress. You can watch whatever you want to watch when you want to watch it. But back then there was something special about I have to catch my show. I'm gonna sit down, eat my breakfast in front of the television, and catch my show. There was something special about it. It made each episode feel bigger, especially when you had these 2-part episodes. You made sure that you were in the room to see both of them. Okay. And I think what happens is now we have so much abundance of cartoon animated content, it starts to feel disposable, and we start treating it like it's disposable. Look at what's happening with a lot of the properties on Cartoon Network, where they were really in their bag with like Steven Universe and all that other stuff. It was really good, high quality animation, and HBO bought it and was like, I don't care about this. And they treated it as disposable. Like, I'll be honest with you, one of the best shows that I've ever seen is Primal. Primal is one of the best, and I'm not just talking about animated shows. I'm talking about one of the best programs that I've ever observed, and it was special. But because there's such an abundance of animated content that's at people's fingertips, it feels it people view it, and the executives view it as just disposable filler content. Okay. The reason why Saturday mornings mattered was you might tune in for like X-Men and catch and discover something else. I tuned in for X-Men and found out they had a Silver Surfer show, and I was locked in on the Silver Surfer animated series. You might sit through one show because you were just waiting for another. It may not have been your gig, but you were sitting down waiting for another show to come on. Okay. And the network was kind of curated more for that mass audience. And so what happens is now that we're based on algorithms, your algorithm will serve you whatever you're watching. Like if you're streaming animated content, it will serve you what animation that it thinks you want to see and won't show you stuff that you might want to see, but the algorithm has no sense that you might want to see it. It's a different game. It makes it hard. Discovery is easier and harder. Okay. So now every kid is a personalized funnel for this stuff. Okay. So the cultural loss isn't cartoons. The loss was kind of this shared time where it was something specifically carved out for kids, and we could go and have our own conversations about it. We lost anticipation. We lost discovering new cartoons and new series. Um, it's the loss of having that it's the loss of having the conversation with your friends on the playground about the latest episode of GI Joe. So the schedule made a matter. That's all I got on that side of it. I may take a deeper dive. If you guys are interested, leave me a like, let me know, or drop a comment. Let me know if you want more stuff like that, like deeper dives about things along those lines. There's a whole lot of information around it. And I think, was it hit Secret Galaxy or Toy Galaxy has a really robust breakdown of Saturday morning cartoons and what happens. But if you want me to take my deeper dive and kind of do it through my funnel, through my experience, just let me know. Next thing. Let's talk power scaling. This falls into character issues, but it also falls into a new segment that I want to do. And it's kind of a homage to a Facebook group that I used to admin, called Who Would Win in a Fight. It was really a diverse group of nerds, and we had some amazing conversations and amazing interactions in there. And this was kind of when Death Battle was really taking hold and becoming a thing on YouTube. But the group preceded that. And so in order to, I want to start a segment about who would win in a fight. I know there's a bajillion fight making comic book characters or cartoon characters fight each other. There's a bajillion of those. I want to add my voice to it because I'm fascinated by this stuff. Okay. And so first things first, we have to talk, well, before we start talking about character matchups and all this other stuff. And this is kind of sparked by a lot of the conversation around Invincible and how they're showing General Thrag moving, or Grand Regent Thrag moving, and he's on Demon Time. And people who didn't read the comic books weren't expecting Thrag to show up and show out the way he did, and it invariably starts bringing the conversation about Thrag versus Superman. And it opens up that entire a can of worms when it comes to putting characters in fictional fights and fictional conflicts and seeing who would win if they fought each other. And so you start seeing Thrag versus Homelander, Thrag versus Superman, Thrag versus Hulk, all of these that start coming out. I like those kind of conversations. I'm not bored by them, but I do think we need to have some kind of frame around it and some kind of narrative frame around it. So let's talk about power scaling. And we got to use Marvel as the example for this, because DC's power scaling doesn't necessarily exist. Yeah, people have feats and everything, but there is no real necessary scale to tell you how much stronger Superman is than Wonder Woman or Aquaman. And Marvel actually tried to do that. So let's talk about it. Marvel tried to quantify power. They built broad strength classifications through reference materials like the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. If you ever get a chance in the used comic book store, grab those. Like if you see the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, they're normally based on the letter of the alphabet. It's really good, really entertaining reading to see, to get a little bit of groundwork about how the original artist viewed these characters. And so, but the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, that was a series of comics, and I know they've released bound versions of it. But in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, they had different strength classes, specifically strength. Class 10, class 25, class 75. I think they had class 85 and class 100. These gave readers a baseline, and class 10 meant you could lift up to 10 tons. Now, here's the thing. The comic book writers had no idea how much 10 tons was and what something that 10 tons looked like, but it sounded like a lot. And so they just used that. The entire class 100 thing. There are superheroes that are class 100 that have lifted things that are hundreds of thousands of tons in the book. They in real life they weigh hundreds of thousands of tons, and they've lifted those too. So it does break down a little bit, but this is the original system that they use. But they gave readers a baseline, um, and the stories kind of stretched and violated those boundaries. I know Spider-Man has at least one near class 100 feet of strength that I can remember, um, possibly more. I know the Thing, Ben Grimm, who is class 85 and has kind of graduated up to class 100, has stuff that is way over class 100. Of course, the Hulk is the one that comes to mind, where he is class 100 plus, but initially it was class 100 all the way up to incalculable. He had feats that were not limited by 100 tons, but these feats gave readers a baseline. Okay. Marvel gave a system and the rights around it when the story needs a little bit more. So Marvel strength class system was useful because it gave fans a starting point, and kind of an anchoring point within the Marvel universe. Okay. Spider-Man's not supposed to be in the same raw strength category as the Hulk, but he also is much stronger than your regular human being. Magnitude stronger than your basic human being. The Thing is usually a heavy hitter. The Hulk scales beyond the chart because his rage makes his strength unlimited. The system's not useless. It gives you language. It gives you a measuring stick so that when you're sitting there watching this, reading the books, you're not wondering why doesn't Spider-Man just knock the Hulk out, because it's physically impossible for him to do in that universe. The feats kind of complicate everything, and that's the issue. Isn't necessarily the classification that exists, but the issue is that the feats don't always respect those classifications. Spider-Man is an example. Spider-Man is listed at class 100, he's listed like a class anywhere between class 10 and class 25, depending on where he is in his history. But he has feats that are way beyond that label. I know Luke Cage has been anywhere between class 25 and class 75. Okay. But he's able to scrap a little bit with the Hulk. Okay. And so when we have these conversations, one person argues from the handbook, another person takes the internet, somebody argues from the page, and then we start talking about different feats. And they're all using Marvel material, but you're using different writers. It's not the same kind of evidence. Okay. One person is arguing from the stat card, the other person is arguing from the comic book panel. And so when we're having these conversations within the group regarding the power scaling thing, and I had to pull it up so you guys could see what I'm talking about. It created different conversation. And so one of the things I'm stuck with is when Marvel and DC, because they've done a couple of different crossovers, right? They've done a couple of different crossover books. Marvel and DC have done a number of crossover books. The one that comes to mind is the one that I saw in the 90s, because that's really the first one I was fully aware of. And so you had the conversation of Hulk versus Superman. And you always get your fans of either side. And they're fighting to the death on it. And my thing, I was always asking, well, what universe are they in? Are they in the Marvel universe or the DC universe? Because the way that they have it scaled and the way that they have it laid out is in the Marvel universe, physics work one way, and then in the DC universe, physics work the other way. It was an easy way to lay it out, because in the Marvel universe, the Hulk's strength was tiered incalculable and tied to the physics of the Marvel universe. Whereas he goes to the DC universe and his strength is incalculable, but so Superman's strength is incalculable. And vice versa. If Superman came over to the Marvel universe, he would still be tied to the same power scaling system. And so he would be class 100 and above. Like I said, it's just I enjoy the fact that there exists a power scaling thing. Now, the problem with it is, like I said, we have almost 60, 70, damn near 80 years of material. And so through different artists and different time frames and different understandings of different things about science, it becomes very difficult to maintain the feats in the power scaling. Okay. So the baseline isn't the ceiling. Marvel's power classes work best as baselines. They're not hard caps. They tell you where a character is. They tell you where Captain America is in relationship to She-Hulk. Okay. But and then there'll be cases where you might see Captain America punch She-Hulk and it actually affect her, which if you're going strictly on what the power scaling says, that should never happen. But it tells you where a character is. It doesn't, they don't tell you the wildest thing the character's ever done. And a character's average showing and peak feet aren't the same thing. Spider-Man can normally catch cars, but what he can't do is lift a 100,000 pound building or 100,000 ton building off of him or a bridge or whatever. So let's pivot into this. So I'm building out who will win in a fight, and I'm bringing it to the stream because just in honor of the group, bro. Like it was so many cool people in that specific Facebook group. I love to start it again, but it's just a matter of getting everybody's in different places right now. And it's hard to get the same crew back invested in it. And it was really kind of a product of its time. Okay, but I'm bringing it back. So who would win in a fight? I'm still building out the rules, but we're going to do it anyway. Okay, this is my new segment idea for the show. And it's a shout out to the old Facebook group that I used to admin. It's a group that has Marvel fans, DC fans, indie comic fans, anime fans. In general, all the nerds can kind of come and involve themselves in who would win in a fight. I don't know how I'm going to facilitate this on a large scale, but I'm going to figure out a way. The debates can get spirited, but when they were good, they were really good. People brought feats, they brought tactical arguments, they brought matchup logic. And yeah, every group had outliers. We had to put rules in, like Batman can't win every fight. We can't put Superman in every single fight. Somebody wanted Harry Potter in every single fight. Okay. We had to make rules around it. The segment is not becoming another versus channel. It's just me doing me. And I know that there's 1,000 other groups that are 1,000 other places that are doing the same thing. This is just my spin on it. But it's bringing back the same kind of nerd conversation that gets me excited and the kind of conversations I used to have with my friends growing up about this nerd stuff. Okay. So I'm still trying to figure out the ground rules for this segment. And the only reason I'm trying to figure out the ground rules because conversations could get idiotic really fast. Okay. Ground rule number 0 is Batman cannot be in every fight. He can't be in every fight. He cannot win every fight. Batman with prep time is not a universal cheat code. It works in the comic books. Once you get outside of his universe, you just can't count on that every single time. Okay. He's tactical. He's prepared. He's disciplined. He's resourceful. That's all well and good. But that doesn't mean that he can just he can win anybody as long as he has prep time. Because you could make the same argument for Dr. Doom. And arguably, Dr. Doom has done more amazing stuff than Batman has done with prep time. Okay. So this rule applies to everybody. There's no automatic winners. You can't just say prep time is the cheat code. Prep time cannot be the game genie. Okay. So I'll lay out a couple of the ground rules, but I'm still figuring out how we're going to do the who would win in a fight ground rules and specifically how we're going to do the forum. One, what universe are we in? We got to acknowledge whose universe we're fighting in. Marvel rule and DC rules have different rules. The Flash's top speed in the Marvel universe is nowhere near his top speed in the DC universe. Okay. Marvel actually has to pretend to care and be knowledgeable about physics and stuff, and it blends in with science words. Magic has its own rules in the Marvel universe and DC universe. DC is really conceptual. It runs on mythologies and symbols and cosmic forces. And so there are differences between the universes. And so we need to discuss that. So we have to pick the where they're fighting. Okay. Which version of the character? You cannot just pluck Superman 1 million and say this is Superman. Like you have to specify Superman 1 million. Okay. Savage Hulk ain't World Breaker Hulk. Golden Age Superman is not post crisis Superman. Okay. Movie versions are not comic book versions. Okay. You can't just say Superman, Batman, or Hulk like there's only one of them. You have to dictate which era and where they're from. Okay. Um, let's see. Rule 3, feats matter, but so does consistency. One insane feat can show potential. Repeated feats show that there's capability. Peak feats show what happened one time. Consistent feats show what we should expect. Rule 4, if we're going to do this thing, if we're going to do the who would win in a fight thing, rule 4, speed is not just speed. Okay. You need travel speed, combat speed, reaction time, perception, durability, and control. Okay. Silver Surfer travels at absurd speeds. Flash fights at absurd speeds because his power scales with movement and perception and protection altogether. Speed without perception and durability is not superpower. Okay. Rule 5, physical advantages and tactical advantages both matter. Okay. There are some very narrow reasons why we cannot put Steel up against Magneto. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. Strategy matters, but it's not pixie dust. There's a specific reason why Thrag and Superman will not work. And if you've read the comics, you know exactly why. Thrag ain't whooping Superman. At least the comic book version of Thrag ain't whooping Superman, and there's a very specific reason why. Okay. Rule 6, environment and setup matter. Okay. I don't need to go into that. City, desert, space, underwater for Aquaman or the Submariner. Okay. Rule 7, narrative weight exists, but we have to control for it because plot armor is real. Batman wins some of the shit that happens in Batman books because it's a Batman book. Okay. Main character energy is real. There's a reason why Wolverine is in damn near everything. Because he's the most popular X-Men character. And so we got to shove him in everything. But he has a ton of plot armor because there's some shit that Wolverine does that should not happen. And it should not be a thing. Plot armor can't decide everything. That's not analysis. We can admit plot armor exists without making an entire argument. Okay. So here's an example of some future frames. All right. So Homelander versus Omni-Man. Okay. If you read the comic books, I would put Omni-Man at a tier below Homelander. I mean, no, let me phrase it. I'll put Homelander at a tier below Omni-Man. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on one second, y'all. What's up? Call her back. So, I would have Homelander a couple tiers below Omni-Man just because I've read the boys' comics and I know that Homelander's durability, he is he is vulnerable to a lot of physical weapons if somebody has a level of strength to apply them. Okay. Omni-Man exists in a universe with much higher power scaling, durability, speed, and planetary stakes. Okay. And so we could have that conversation, but if you're going to pick Homelander over Omni-Man, you better be able to bring some kind of proof. Okay. I know there's already a million channels. That's true, but it's not just who wins. The point is, what rules are we using? What evidence matters? What's the tactical path? What does the matchup reveal about the characters? I don't care if everybody agrees with the answer. I care if the argument makes sense. Got it? So I want to roll out who would win in a fight. I need to take a quick pause for the cause, and I'll be right back. Still a husband and dad, so I still have to take phone calls. All right, so um, but yeah, I want to do the who would win in a fight thing. We have to have ground rules if we're going to do character versus character stuff because this stuff can get stupid if we don't put some kind of ground rules down. So I'm going to figure out the format and how we're going to present it, but I want to do something along those lines. If you're interested, drop a request, and maybe I'll even have a format where you guys can submit your own potential battles. Okay. Let's talk about I want to talk about this is kind of ask a dad thing. This channel is Blurting While Dad, and it's about a black dad who's a comic book nerd, who's a nerd, and I have my nerdy interests. Next week I will be ready to talk about my thoughts on my reread of The Dark Tower, and I'm on the Wastelands right now. I just finished drawing of the three, and so I'm gonna be having conversations about that. But I used to be more ashamed of being this nerd, this black nerd, because in the 90s it wasn't cool being a black nerd, bro. Like it was not fun. But I've really, since about 10th grade, 1995, 96, I've really kind of embraced who I am and what my interests are in terms of this stuff. And one of the things is it's weird because your passion can ebb and flow. Like there was a time where I actually thought I had grown out of comic books until I actually needed a reprieve and I needed to go back into something that made me feel comfortable. And then I was back into comic books. Um, Sometimes your passion for the nerd thing, or the thing that you have a nerdy passion for, it starts to fade. For me, it can be a byproduct of ADHD because it kind of goes in cycles. Some days I'm really super interested, or some months I'm really super interested in pro wrestling. Other months I'm really in my comic book bag. Other months I'm really into my fantasy and horror movie and book bag. And so it really shifts based on where my attention is and where my energy is. But if you have one really strong nerd passion, the passion that you have, the nerd passion that you have, it can fade. And it's scary because it can feel disorienting because you don't really know who you are. Okay. Especially if that thing's been a part of your identity for years. You know, comics, games, anime, collecting cards, whatever it is. You start wondering, have I grown out of this? Am I done with this? But fading interest in a thing doesn't always mean the love is gone. It just means you got other stuff going on in your life. You know, uh, for a long time, I drifted out of comic books when work got really tough. But my sanctuary when I couldn't find anything else was going to the comic book store on my days off and finding used comic books and reading them. That ended up being my sanctuary. That was the thing that bailed me out of a dark place with my job, was being able to reignite my passion and reignite and get reacquainted with my passion. Okay. Sometimes you're oversaturated. Sometimes you just need space. Sometimes you just need a break from the things that you even are passionate about. Um, Sometimes your life has shifted and your relationship with the thing has to change. There was a time where I went for almost 3 or 4 years where I didn't really play video games at all. And then I found a way, I got back into them, and it ended up becoming a comfort thing to cool my brain off. Losing excitement over a specific nerd interest doesn't mean you're losing your identity. You don't stop being a nerd because you're not reading a new comic book every week. You don't start loving comics because you're not buying new issues right now. Okay. I haven't been to a comic book movie. Like the Fantastic Four First Steps was the first comic book movie I had been to in over a year, and it's almost been a year since. Okay. We used to make an appointment to see whenever the newest thing dropped from Marvel or DC. And now I don't have that anymore. Okay. Identity and activity are related, but they're not the same. You are not required to constantly consume everything to prove you still love it. And I think in nerd spaces, we get really bad with the gatekeeping because, I could be out of the loop for a while. But just because I'm out of the loop with, this new writer or this new storyline doesn't mean that I'm still not a nerd and invested in said thing. I just haven't had time. And I feel like we do too much checking each other's credentials over that. Okay. You're not required to constantly consume something to prove you love it. Sometimes you're just full. Sometimes you can go for years and your brain could get full. That's an ADHD thing for me. My brain will reach a saturation point almost on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. And I may not have the things that I love may end up feeling like a burden. Like I may want to go and buy the latest issue or download the latest issue of X, Y, and Z, but I have to just say, I got to listen to it on YouTube, man. I don't have the bandwidth to go do this. Okay. And sometimes the hobby can start feeling like homework. Keeping up with every book, every issue, every reboot, controversy, casting rumor, and online debate, it can get really exhausting, and it will destroy your joy. That's why I joke around, but sometimes I will say nerds will kill joy. They will destroy people your passion for things, arguing with them on a daily basis. And at some point, joy just turns into maintenance. Sometimes you're not bored, you're just completely overloaded. So um you don't want to ever force it. Okay. Keep pushing. If you keep pushing through being burnt out on your passion, the love you have will turn and start feeling like a burden. Okay. It's better to step away and pause and say, I love comic books, or I love the latest anime, or whatever. I just need to step away from a little bit. Specifically, like with pro wrestling, I had to step away because I was getting super cynical about it because I wasn't connecting with the product in a way. And it wasn't just WWE. It was TNA, it was AEW. I wasn't connecting with any of the product that they were putting out there, and I was actually hating watching every week. And it took me to a bad place where I'm like, I don't want to watch this anymore. I think I'm falling out of love with it. And so I just had to hit the pause button. Okay. But taking a break isn't quitting. Breaks are part of long-term fandom. You can step away and then come catch back up later. Or you can skip entire arcs that you don't like. If you're reading a comic book and you're like, I don't like this arc, you can just skip it and pick it up later. You can stop buying for a while. You can come back when something motivates you. I had walked away from a lot of DC comic books because it was kind of listless up until the Absolute Universe rolled around and the mainline DC universe stepped up. And now Marvel's the one that seems to be really directionless. Okay. The love may come back differently. One of the things that really got me back into collecting was being able to hear comic book breakdowns on YouTube, because I may not have always been able to get into the store or had the money to download the latest issue or latest arc, but I could listen to somebody else break it down and then go collect it afterwards. Okay. So the love might be come back differently. It may be more selective, less obsessive, and a little bit healthier. But coming back doesn't mean that that is fake. Okay. Sometimes sometimes the way you keep loving something is by leaving it alone for long enough for the joy to return. And that's with a lot of different things. Sometimes you got to walk away from a thing that you love and um see if that joy returns or if you feel like there's a void that you're missing. Okay? So, I kind of took a break from and so I'm saying that to say this. I took a little bit of a break this week from ADHD content. I know that that's stuff that you guys really like and you like hearing what I have to say on it. But one thing I don't want to do is I want to share my experiences with you, and I want to create a space where it's comfortable and safe for people, specifically Black folks with ADHD, to share their experiences because we don't always have that, you know, um, and specifically for Black folks, but people that are marginalized with ADHD, we don't always have a safe space to discuss it. But I realized I needed to kind of take a break because I was trying to come up with topics to discuss and it wasn't feeling organic or natural. One, two, I also don't want to present myself as your avatar or your hero or the person that you follow regarding this. I can share my experiences with you. I could tell you what works for me, and I can refer you and say, hey, how's it going? Thanks for jumping in. So, I could share a lot of my experience with ADHD, but I had to step away a little bit from this week just because I don't want to be, because what happens is you start getting parasocial stuff like, um, and I'm not a therapist. I was going to school for it. Didn't most of the coursework for it, but there was some shenanigans that happened where that wasn't available to me, and that master's degree program was something I couldn't afford, and the people that said they were going to pay for it reneged on the plan. So I would have been a licensed clinical therapist, but it just wasn't in the cards for me at the time. But even if I was a licensed clinical therapist, I would not be doing clinical therapy on a live stream. And I don't want to set it up where people are looking to me for their guidance when it comes to um, diagnosing their ADHD or getting help with it. The most I can tell you is seek a professional's help, and I can tell you what happened and what worked for me and what I've seen because I even though I'm not a clinical therapist or any of those other stuff, my background comes working with kids with neurodivergence, and providing safe environments for them, residential environments and things along those lines. So that's where it comes from. I know the difference between a positive environment for a kid that has ADHD and some other stuff versus a non-positive environment and structured environment. I don't want people to see me as their one and done answer in a box and stuff like that. And I have to figure out how I'm going to put lines around it and put boundaries around the conversation so that uh, people don't see me as the end all be all when it comes to black ADHD adult knowledge. Like I don't want people to see me as that. Um, and a lot of times my advice is stuff that works for me. But I would never tell you what medicine to take. I would never tell you what your diagnosis is. I would never give you any cognitive behavioral science. What I will give you is things that worked for me and things that didn't work for me. And that's about it. But I wanted to take a little bit of a break from that conversation this week so I can get my bearings and figure out what my boundaries are around that. Um, because it was one specific message that kind of got me. And I'm like, oh, this is not going the right way. And it wasn't a bad message. It was a heartwarming message, but um, there's a little bit of parasocial stuff in there, and I don't want to open that doorway because specifically vulnerable place uh, with your neurodivergence, and you really need help. You should not be turning to me for your answers. I can provide you a little bit of guidance and say, hey, you need to seek out a professional, and I could tell you what worked for me, but you should not be turning to me for your treatment. It's just not. And so I took a look, I'm putting a pause on that conversation um until next week, and then I can establish some boundaries around how I want to proceed with sharing my ADHD journey as an adult. Because I'm realizing it is a solid component of the show, and I'm realizing that it does benefit people to hear somebody else's experiences. But what doesn't benefit people is not having boundaries about it. Okay. And I hate to vague post like this, but I kind of got to because I don't want to necessarily out anybody, but um it was more on one of the social media things that I posted. I don't want people to see me as their answer or their savior when it comes to this stuff because um I can't I don't know you personally. I can't guide you. I don't know the nuances. I'm not professionally equipped to deal with some of the stuff that comes with the ADHD diagnosis and some of the other emotions and things that are tied to it, especially after discovering, especially if you're an adult who is getting diagnosed after going through a tumultuous childhood with it. Um yeah. So anyway, Uh, but yeah, Maddie, thanks for tuning in. I'm sorry that you caught the end of it. I'm about to log off here, but I'll catch you next week. I gotta go up here and grab something to eat before I go get my daughter from play rehearsal. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. I gotta log off and do the dad thing. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.